I'll start by briefly introducing us, I guess, in a little more detail. And then we'll go on to speak, I suppose, for the purpose of her Art Story Talks, we'll give a little overview, kind of focusing on how Becky's professional and personal life intersect in her career. The talk will be an hour long, and there will be space for questions at the end as well, so please come prepared. So, as mentioned, my name is Louise O'Kelly. I am the founding director and creator of Block Universe, which is London's leading performance art festival. We have undertaken, I think, since the pandemic, probably a virtual festival and a number of digital events supporting artists. We normally take place in London every May as an annual festival, and we've also organised projects in Italy, Germany, and somewhere else, Dubai. And with me, of course, is the wonderful Becky Beasley. Thank you, Becky, for being here today. Becky is a Paul Hammond Artist Award recipient who has participated in numerous international exhibitions, among them Towner Gallery, South London Gallery, Leeds City Gallery, Spike Island, Serpentine Gallery Pavilion, Tate Britain, Whitworth, Blue Coat, Walker Art Gallery, and Whitechapel Gallery. It's a very illustrious career. She has also received a late autism diagnosis in 2021, which will be one of the things that we talk about today. And she's a really passionate advocate for female neurodiversity in the arts, as well as hormonal health self-care. She's also a senior lecturer in fine art at Goldsmiths College and is represented internationally by Galleria Plan B in Berlin and Francesca Mini Gallery in Milan. So Becky, thank you. As mentioned, you've obviously had a very illustrious career today. You're represented by some wonderful galleries. And I understand the last few years has been a really interesting moment for you personally. So, apart from the pandemic, which of course we all lived through, you also received your autism diagnosis. And I understand that had a really profound impact on the way that you view your life and your career experiences to date, and in many ways formed also the backdrop for a recent exhibition, HSP, or Promising Mid-Career Woman. So I wondered if you might talk a little bit more about, I guess, those experiences, what that has meant to you, and I guess how this new lens of neurodivergency has equipped you new tools to kind of reflect upon your life and career. It's a lot, but
but it's I think this sort of last 4 or 5 years has been a period of time that was kind of inevitable in that I'm now 47. So from about 43, really, things sort of changed quite a lot for me. Obviously then crossing over in the midst of all that is then the pandemic and the sort of all the experiences that have gone with that. And I guess the sort of, for me, the framework is from the last few years and then being able to kind of understand retrospectively, really, aspects of, I have a very holistic attitude to work and life, and inadvertently, in about, I guess, 4 years ago now, discovering the gender health gap and medical misogyny that I'd been left to sort of flounder in for 30 years with some things that had been undiagnosed that had caused me a lot of difficulty. For me, the layers is moving from being established into extremely proud to be in a mid-career position as a female artist, but also then into perimenopause, but which is also very much the case is that movement of hormones causes so many undiagnosed neurodivergent women to go into kind of breakdown. And often actually that is the moment when there's a possibility to kind of work out that that's what's going on. So I guess so I think for so many females there's so many things that are just kind of unknown or mysterious or just ongoing difficulties that actually I found myself so much in the last 4 years working some things out. This is not rocket science. This is not rocket science. So yeah, sort of layering of that sort of whole picture of like being in one's 40s and then I guess being me, so that hormonal shift that also then helped me to expose the undiagnosed autism, which has been so common for females for so long, but we're all, we're coming out now. We're working it out, because it's really dangerous. It's very traumatic to live with undiagnosed autism, and especially as we get older, it just gets harder and harder to bear. And also, I think that the time of the pandemic, that my experience of having time and then having certain opportunities to be alone in ways that I hadn't over quite a few years since I had my son, that was very useful in having opportunity to be in studio. My partner was on furlough, so he said go to the studio, and and I suddenly started to feel like really well, like I hadn't felt. So it's a slow drip of this sort of matrix, and I'm also aware there's lots of people found out a lot of things about themselves during the pandemic in all sorts of ways. So I think there's things about that I think, and for me it's sort of what are the opportunities in what I can learn about myself during in a way like the most difficult times actually. So that was really important, and then I think then working towards over kind of year, making my last exhibition, which was in Berlin at Plan B Gallery, who I work with, who represent me. So it was a sort of really like a sort of year of like kind of revelation, but all at the same time it's going, I've always known this, I just never had any language for and I think that's where arts come in really.
Yeah.
Is
sort of empowered you in some way.
No, that sorry, that was
no.
No,
but it's interesting.
One of those, I didn't mean that quite as aggressively as it came out. No, more because I think what I've found kind of useful, but I think also there is an opportunity for me to kind of put together some things which quite early on after my diagnosis, Sonia Bouet, who's one of our really leading lights for neurodiversity and access kind of questions around. She used to mentor individual women, and when I first met her, she said, I don't really do this anymore, I mainly mentor institutions now. I was like, what? But she had a couple of hours for me a couple of years ago, which was amazing, and she said because I have had this kind of the career that I've had, which has been kind of continued to progress, which I'm extremely proud of, but she's because of access issues within neurodiversity and disability, it's extremely difficult. And so I remember she said, how did you get in the room, Becky? And I was like, at the time I was like, didn't really kind of know, but I think there is a narrative, I think, that I'm in in a position to be able to sort of like work backwards and work out how certain things that I always knew were like incredibly, I just thought I was going to die doing them, but I did them, and it's a sort of Rottweiler, when I know what my mission is, whether it's seeing through, making an exhibition, or as I became this absolutely like passionate, inadvertent dental health gap warrior over the last years, which is really just a trigger of like my autistic natural advocacy tendency in my character profile, and also connects up then with certain things becoming special sort of areas of interest and focus.
Yeah.
And so, you know, art was always my primary kind of special interest.
Yeah.
But I think also because for me, the thing that never happened was somebody like never came and sat down with me like 4 years ago and said, so Becky, you're drifting into like mid-career now, but well done, but we have to tell you this, this and this and this. You know, that would have been, it's like you can buy books for like, you know, the rules of school for, you know, autistic, you know, females, you know, the rules, like, really would have been useful. So there's been a lot of slowly sort of fumbling and feeling and working out what it was this is and why suddenly, like, there was like, I wasn't required and there was nothing to do. Not for me, not to do with not taking up public space in terms of making exhibitions, because one, it's really tired at that point, and actually it's a sort of natural sort of quietening process of the young, the up and coming, the career that sort of, you need to keep having opportunities to build, but then but more like these types of opportunity actually, I think, because what I've realised is like at this point we have so much experience, and it just feels to somebody like me really useful to have opportunities to kind of share that. So and I use for a couple of years I used my social media platforms really intensively to share about what I was finding out for in terms of
yeah, that's something actually that we might
women's health.
Talk a little bit more about, because I know that, like, you know, I think it's really amazing how open you've been about your diagnosis, and, you know, also in terms of really generously sharing resources for others. Like, there's a really incredible PDF on Becky's website, if you're interested, you can download that, you know, includes information about neurodivergency, female hormonal health. And I think it's also interesting that, you know, you highlighted the fact of also being like female autistic, because I understand that it's a lot less common that women are diagnosed rather than men. It's not even a question that's asked. So, you know, how important for you, alongside obviously the artistic practice, you know, which is key. I understand, you know, this has kind of become a real passion as well in recent years. And how important is, you know, advocacy or even activism for you in kind of with regard, you know, these health issues, I guess, and how that can impact an artist's career?
Yeah, well, I think the way I kind of see it is that it's like where, like, what is being invited to take up public space, right? And so there's space for younger and up and coming artists, and that sort of evolution into finding a sort of place where you become like established as an artist, which is, you know, these things make huge difference, like at each point, and so there's requirement for lots of space for that process of, like, the space that I myself took in, like, those institutions you mentioned along the way. I took up public space, like, you know, and I think one really, really, really big thing that I've really come to understand in the last 2 years is that because in my personal life from 14, so within a year of first period, and progesterone intolerance, which instead of progesterone soothing you, it's extremely distressing. Lots and lots of women live with it, and it goes round every month, you know, every month. So our younger women coming up in the arts, it's a huge thing, having a cycle that's going around, and if you don't understand what's happening to you at the different points in it, and if you are intolerant to progesterone, for example, which is very common and a very common cause of premenstrual, just distress, like difficulty. Some women just, have...
Yeah, if there's a hormone imbalance.
There's lots of reasons
kind of things.
for, so knowing each knowing their own cycle, so you understand how to try and organise yourself a bit, or to be prepared. So that's, it's because that's going on every more or less 28 days for pretty much everyone.
Yeah.
So that's a lot for us. And if we're like trying to build up off this, so there's the undiagnosed progesterone.
Right?
So basically, like 30 years, it's like undiagnosed progesterone intolerance once my period started, and which also exacerbated my undiagnosed autism, which also then produced eating disorder, which is very common. And then that's the next 30 years.
Right.
So that's what I would like to stop happening, that, your teenage daughter, you can take them back to the GP and say, look, she's depressed.
Yes, She
got a period 6 months ago, now she's really depressed, and she's bulimic, Sorry, I'm going into my old...
No, but I mean, it's really true.
But still take her back, and then they'll give her antidepressants. It's like, so... Yeah. Anyway, but my point being that with all of that matrix, plus with autism and trying to understand how to, to working out how to try and understand what's going on around you and have friends and relationships, and it's very complicated when you have a completely different, neuro. Yeah. And so, my point being that over the last couple of years, I look back, I was like, my God, the shows that I had opportunity taking up that public space was like, it was my joy. This was, I was always like, I just work, and then everything else, it's like, it is what it is. And so it's made me really feel very clear about how for artists who are marginalised for whatever reason, and especially through different types of disability, with some of the greatest minds and artists and creative people, of their generations, who are at home right now, unemployed, no space to put themselves into, and it's just like pouring, I don't know. I want to say like money down a toilet, but I don't quite mean that. It's just like throwing.
I know what you mean, when there's all this kind of untapped talent, or in a way, if the internal landscape is so challenging as well, then it's how you can actually manage to succeed in a career like you have and continue that trajectory. Because it is very challenging as an artist, regardless. Yeah, right?
but also no, not no. But what I mean is that was those making my shows and expressing myself and contributing and participating was just my joy, and that if you take all that away, there's I'm just sitting in a room on my own, so it's absolutely tangible to me. It's about really thinking about what the offer of public space offers to somebody who otherwise everyday mainstream life is just extremely difficult and traumatizing. It's I guess that's what my no was. That's what I'm trying to say is, and. So also it really clarifies things like, I've been really looking forward to today, because I enjoyed, it's also very artistic, it's like one-to-one, or with lots of people around, this format. Small groups are just disastrous, and no threesomes, no, never again.
It's a good rule, right?
My nemesis in my life has been three-way things, and that's where I went down the hole.
But actually, I might, take that kind of, I think there's something as well, I think, about, when I look at the titles of some of your recent exhibitions, they are, there's an element of the kind of self-confessional, being quite open and honest, but also very humorous, or like ironic. I mean, I mentioned the one, HSB, or Promising Mid-Career Woman, which is kind of, really calling yourself out in a way, or, previous titles included like Depressive Alcoholic Mother. And I wondered if you could tell me a little bit more about, I guess, your use of those qualities, or even, I know that text is a really important part of your practice, because, I'm sure if you're familiar with Becky's work as well, that, you produce these, incredibly beautiful, like, installations that comprise a number of different elements, from, photography to sculpture elements, text. And I think your sensitivity to material and colour is also really important in that. But maybe you could tell us a bit more about the jumping off points of those, and even, that language that you use around your shows.
Yeah. Well, I think because Depressive Alcoholic Mother, and then, which is 2018, with my representing gallery, Plan B, Berlin, who are amazing people and citizens and gallerists. And then 3 years later, HSP, which is short for Highly Sensitive Person, which is referencing a book from the 90s by an academic called Elaine Aron, who wrote it. It would have been really useful to have had that in the 90s.
Oh, yeah.
Someone to have recommended it. You're too sensitive for this world. You're going to have to toughen up. You're growing out of skin. I'm trying. I just can't. Not trying anymore.
Yeah.
I can't do that. And so those have been my last 2 shows, my last 2 bodies of work, and I think they very much express my own journey. But I think one of the things with starting with Depressive Alcoholic Mother, which there's pictures of these shows on the Plan B gallery, has the kind of full archive, so if you're interested to look, but the sort of entry, sort of atrium front space of the gallery, I've always loved a sort of atrium, sort of entry space. Yeah. I remember I went to Oxford once for a Yanis Kounellis talk. I was so excited. I loved Yanis Kounellis. And anecdotally, I remember going outside the front for a cigarette just before, and he was out there just like smoking. So I just smoked next to him. It's a personal, live, flesh moment. Anyway, he talked about one of the sort of smaller inner rooms, and he talked about in the Greek sort of entry spaces, in which one would kind of lay your dead for like, I guess, the kind of shiva sort of equivalent, and hang your coat up, like he has hooks, puts his coat up on. And I think there was something about the way he talked about this sort of atrium. I think this, I understand now that like threshold spaces are like such a big thing. Like if you're like anxious or autistic like me, or because of course you've travelled from wherever you've travelled, or walked wherever you walked. Like today, I know people have travelled and been on journeys to get here. So of course then the threshold is this thing, but also you don't really want to be right inside straight away, because you sort of, from an autistic perspective, I just need to like regulate myself and like do my things, like, drink coffee and smoke and not talk to anyone, or come in and just talk way too much. Like, just old years of masking and performing being this female person that's, eventually, hopefully I'll be able to walk in and just, ignore people. Fully unarmed, like, but that's not me. So a love of, like, this sort of entry space. But I think what happened so the Plan B has one of these, although it's just now relocating into new space. But I think also, so it's like this sort of pause. David Lynch talks about it, fantastic interview he did at the time of when The Straight Story came out, and he talks about, so the old man goes on this epic cross-country American road trip on a sit-on lawnmower, because his brother, who he hasn't spoken to for 40 years, is dying. He's like, I'm going to, you know. And then he sort of basically gets to the top of this old dirt track, and there's a bar there, and he knows the brother's like 2 minutes down the track, and he stops and says, I think I'm going to have myself a beer. Right? And he sits down. There's this great scene with what Lynch calls this Zen barman, who's just this small role. Absolutely brilliant. But it's that, really recognising that, like, that you sort of, or just arriving a bit, stopping before you arrive, and just taking this bit of time to sort of, and I've always done that, I've always been early for everything, and there's something about that. So this, you know, new understanding of what this type of space, which I've always loved, and what it's, and also how to use it now, like, in terms of my autism. It's like, so I have, you know, I know how to sort of not rush in, like, but with depressive alcoholic mother, so the front foyer was, I created like a new linoleum floor work in which there's a 1 metre circle in, I think it was just like in a text that says depressive alcoholic mother in 1 metre, black lettering that's the scale to fit the metre, and then the rest is like a soft green that I've used before. And so it became like this, I think one is like with the title, my sort of thoughts were like somebody seeing the show announced and be like, so there's this kind of figure, in a way, proposed, and that part of, I think, and some idea, in each individual person will bring up some sort of different connotation or idea, or some sort of figuring of something, and then that actually in this entering this oratory space, which there's then an opening, you go through then into the main space, it's almost like a sort of literary sort of like a preamble or something, or some sort of little preface to, and that this figure, and this, but saying this figure literally becomes the ground. So that was something, and that there's for me there was an offer to sort of somehow some mode to shift or something to happen, after which one then can go and review then the rest of the show. The rest of the show for Depressive Alcoholic Mother was all working with, curating with existing work. I got to a certain point where I'd had a really good about sort of 10 years or so, and was just getting so depleted and broken and poorly that I just the thought of just even being able to like produce new work, and without really much sort of structural budget or outside of sort of gallery facilitating, like but not having, like, there's no team and no one else, is sort of, you know, it's always been very low key. So there was a number, if you look on my CV, they'll see there's a number of shows from a certain point where they're all curated existing works. And so to me, it's just my like reincarnating planet. I was sort of just kind of got far enough to for it to sort of kind of be interesting to do that, and I was interested, but at the same time, it also was like I just didn't have anything in me. So, but I was like, I just kind of made it to this point where I can now bring out existing work, curate with it, and enjoy that. And like working with Michnia Merkin on he curated then the main part of the Depressive Alcoholic Mother show, and the essay that he produced around his idea around these kind of revolutions and returns and spirals was like, it was like I kind of had sort of understood something about what I've been doing, but it was just such a revelation. And the essay's amazing, and he's an incredible mind and curator. There's one copy of the pamphlet there, but you can download it from Plan B website. And so, you know, so in very much like sort of talking about behind the scenes here, I think, you know, it's sort of trying to find ways to keep going, really, and receiving my Paul Hamlin Award, which is 60 grand, no strings over 3 years. Literally, I think, in many ways, I felt kind of saved my life, really, because at that point it was very depleted and broken, and it's like living with like just 10,000 things you just can't answer or understand, and there doesn't seem to be any answer to. And I think also being female, we have additional problems. One, we learn to mask in the playground from about the age of 8, the girls. That's why we don't get picked up so often, unless we're non-verbal, late, those types of things. Or, but also with the misogyny that's still very structural in society, and just the very simple expressions of being angry or upset about something. It's still it's still just one hop to being called crazy. It's like medieval. It's absolutely brutal, and it's just unbelievable to me. And it's really frightening that you can do so much, and through no fault of your own, women can be like just taken down so easily, and that's something that's very, very palpable to me right now, and really, really just terrifying that we can still be in that place in society. So it doesn't matter like how dignified you try to be. So.
That's something actually that I was curious to talk to you about as well, because maybe this table doesn't make it so visible, but I'm quite pregnant at the moment. And so I was curious because I know, obviously, the show we were talking about is also called Depressive Alcoholic Mother, and it's, it's a well-documented fact that, for a lot of female artists, motherhood can have quite a detrimental impact on their career, and and for some artists, I know that there's even kind of debate about whether you make that so publicly known or visible, for fear of negative consequences. And, I'm curious kind of everything that we're talking about in terms of, the personal life and, how this, informs your practice not only, but also impacts on your career. I mean, how, did that transition for you? I mean, how did you navigate that when you became a mother?
I just got totally screwed. I still am.
Really?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah?
I mean,
like,
sure.
in what ways did you...
I drop my son at school at 9 o'clock every day. I get ready to pick him up at 2:45 every day, except Friday when I'm in London and I have some childcare book for him. You can't get. I'm allowed to swear on this programme now. I'm like, I'm very pro language. You can't get shit done in like 5 hours, really. Yeah. And also with autistic kind of time experience, which I can speak for myself, but I know there's a lot of commonalities. You need a lot of time around things. So where one of the major redesign things I've done is where I might have organised to do this, and this. So I'll be like, 9 till 2:50. I'll do. Hypothetically, whatever those things are, let's just say I would never do that now. Absolutely, there's no way that would happen now. So there's an hour clear from once I've dropped Tom. I have an alternative way of doing it anyway that avoids the playground now, which has been great. But I have this sort of it's sort of finalising the process of waking, regulating, decompressing from getting a child to school. And also sort of floating into myself, and at the same time I do what do we call it? It's I think it's eat the fog, but I think it's eat the frog, but I call it eat the fog, which makes so you get a bunch of little things you just get them done straight away. Okay. So you clear the fog. I don't know why you would have a frog. The fog and then the rest of your day you don't have anything in the way that's going to be just hanging getting and really and with autism really get on your mind. So. And I don't arrange to be with other humans in any way, meetings or anything before 10 a.m. So I know that's work. That I don't fit because. So when I'm going to do the thing I'm going to do, it's very focused, very intense, and you get it done well. But you can't then smash 2 more things next to it. Right. That's where you crash. So it's like redesign stuff. I remember eventually at some point say like, oh, like you've done so much, and I'd be like, thank you. I said the other 50% of my life I was in bed.
Yeah.
And people sort of laugh and they don't believe it. I literally spent 50% of my adult life until, quite recently, just laid out with morbid exhaustion, depression, distress, confusion. Like literally, and it's really bad for you being really depressed and being in bed for like half your adult life. It's really shortened my, I've learned a lot about like gut biome now. So I'm probably like, there's probably things I'm like, I smoke, which I love, but I'm sort of doing other things that I'm probably like, I'm sort of balancing out. Like, my statistical life expectancy as an independent living autistic person is 54.
What?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That's a really.
I had no idea. No idea.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
And what? I mean,
because it's fucking horrific.
Okay. Right.
And so there's lots of different reasons why, from a very young age to older, for one of the major reasons for that is that we find it so hard to get healthcare because it involves a lot of communication.
Right.
So that's quite complicated. I have a backdoor number for my surgery now that I eventually, after 2 years, managed to get because I can't manage the phone system.
Yeah.
And when I call it now, they say, "Who gave you this number?" So now I don't call it.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah. So just one example, but it goes on. It's like a daily obstacle. I'm sure lots of people. It's just I think also then exposing one's own those things that you kind of just endlessly feel like you're just like in a nightmare and they're just pushing and like it's not really, and also like I've always been very kind of interested in kind of American stuff and I kind of worked out now why. It's because home culture, home language, home people is really difficult for autistics, whereas so lots of us actually like to speak in foreign language or like to live in foreign countries. Loads of autistic Icelandic women who just love speaking French. I love speaking French. Like I'm like much happier. Used to do it drunk on buses, late night buses, with anyone I could talk to, and it's a language, and it's like it's English, but it's not, So I don't watch home news. I watch American news. But then I found out that actually home news is often just really distressing to autistic people and sensitive people. So I just don't do it anymore.
Yeah.
I read the New York Times and I watch American news. So that's made life much better.
So you're really seeing kind of that, I guess, often we think of these kind of the larger structural systems of the art world in relation to, motherhood or like mental health or all those things, but it's really you're thinking about it. Yeah. Also just like that, actually what the reality is of day to day. Right?
And for me, at the moment, I'll just tell you the lovely thing about what did I do when I had a little baby. So it was really, I kept trying to like do projects and work and things, and that was quite tricky, but also like just little things. But then there's this point where it's like, I remember thinking it's like sitting in a chair and you've got your arms and legs all tied and bound and gagged, and then someone goes, "You got 2 hours, you can do whatever you want, enjoy." And walking out, shut the door, you're just like, how am I going to like, what can I do? And like, you just, in the early days and years with baby, it's like, it really needs you, like you're literally like, keeping them alive, and they need you to smile at them and like nurture them. And I, there's a lovely project space that's round the corner from where my home is in St Leonard's, called Project 78. Patrick Jones, who used to run the fine art, the BA at the art school, is a great kind of anarchist man, runs this brilliant loose space, and he asked if I wanted to curate, just like do a small project there, like, and so I had this idea, and then one of the things that was lovely was that I wanted to borrow a copy of Mark Camille Chambliss' World of Interiors catalogue. It's a catalogue he made, but that very shortly got pulped because it is a copy of World of Interiors that he then slightly adjusted. It was like a copyright thing. And I've always wished I bought myself when I was younger, when it was affordable. Anyway, so I just sent an email and reached out to see if I could borrow a copy and maybe collaborate on a bit of furniture. Anyway, what was really lovely, and it's sort of this, so I didn't know Mark Camille at all. I loved his work for a long, long time, but I just took a little punt, and so we ended up eating sardines on toast in his beautiful apartment that he no longer lives in, that he'd decorated himself and was just so incredible. And we made a piece of furniture together, a little folding book table in his favourite milk thistle colour. And then he came down when there were some readings, and then he invited me to his opening at the Serpentine evening. He was very busy then, but I went. And my point being, like, this isn't like, because I didn't know Mark Camille Chamblitz, I just loved his work and had followed his career. But so over this course of this year, where I was just feeling like I just didn't even exist anymore, I just was like doing these little things with Mark Camille Chamblitz, and I was just like, I just felt wonderful. I was so happy. I was like, this is like more than I could ever have dreamed to happen in this year. And also, it made I had this thing that I'd wake up and I'd be like, I'm doing these things with Mark Camille. Like, they're little quiet, tiny little things, but they mean the world to me. And just his spirit, just for whatever reason, he just sort of saw me, and then, and I never heard from him again. Like, it was like poof. So that was something that I did that really made a big difference to myself. So I recommend it as a little formula for.
I might actually take a little tangent there as well, because that sounds like a really wonderful space to be in, and and I see, also in your practice that you do often kind of enter in maybe not such a direct dialogue, but more, abstract dialogues with, different writers or artists, whether they be contemporary or historical. And I wonder maybe if you might speak a little bit about what those relationships look like.
Yeah, all my dead white men.
Yeah, well, I was curious. I was like, it is quite noticeably so. And
it's an unpicking of it was this pursuit, this search, and it was like, I think there was some qualities, there were these figures, and then there was my dad. So I've been making artwork in relation to my dad since I was about 16, and so this in so many ways that for me, who is this guy? Because he was like my guy. At the same time, in a way for me, what I feel like, because it's such an interesting moment, this getting middle-agey sort of moment, but also having not known something really core about yourself, but also having made loads of art and exhibitions. It's it's I can kind of review it.
Right.
It's I guess people have journals or diaries or all sorts of ways through work and private life, and that we express our search for our own individual self and identity. It's not none of the issues of autism are they're all human issues. It's just there's just degrees,
so these kind of proxies for the father.
I feel like it's me. I'm autistic. My dad's autistic, but never diagnosed. So, but also he's there's this sort of comedy of tragedy, and this sort of figure that I was always, this sort of clown figure that I was always interested. So, and when I made an exhibition which was called A Gentle Man, which was a large-scale installation with video, full video works, which was in Washington Square, New York, at the NYU gallery there. Nicola Leese with somebody who was, she was actually in the year below me at Goldsmiths,
Oh,
Fine Art
really?
History. Yep,
Great.
yeah. I remember like she could cross her eyes, and it used to make me like laugh so much. I wet myself for some reason, and so she went on having her career. And actually, I worked with her at the Serpentine, and then when she moved to New York for this job, I think I get the sense like, actually, because you're sort of like finishing programs and beginning programs, like I don't know about this, is like what I glean from a curator's life, and actually then in the beginning of a new program, it's a really great time to work with someone that you kind of have worked with and know, while you're kind of getting your feet on the ground with all the stuff that's going to be new in like a new continent, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it was a lovely opportunity to work with Nicola again, and then follow on this journey with Thomas Bernard, Bernard Malamud, who was a Jewish American immigrant author who I'd really fallen in love with his short stories. So, and The Gentleman was this sort of fantasy-like figure of this sort of man from 1940. Why did I start with Dad or him? It basically sort of straddles this like a life of this man, but it's this hybrid of Bernard Malamud and my dad. And my dad, I got a review for the show, and it said British actor Peter Beasley. My dad's a retired doctor, so he's like quite pleased with that. This hybrid sort of figure, and I think that's where, when I was so fascinated by Tristram Shandy, Lawrence Stern's great Shaggy Dog novel, and the beginning of Spring Rain was like, I just wanted to like read it and finish it, because I'd had like 10 aborted like starts. I don't know if anyone here's read it or finished it. The Life and Times of Tristram Shandy, you sort of have to turn it to a military operation and the sort of centre of like your next big art project, and then it's like, then you just get the job done. But which is this just attempt to sort of write a life in some way, and it's sort of the origin of like Samuel Beckett's like My Troubles Began 9 months before I was born. It's like that's like right there in Tristram Shandy. It's like great sort of humour, and hundreds of pages on names, on noses. Some of them you just got to. It's a bit like Melville.
Right. Moby Dick.
It's a bit. You get these sort of long. It's like the long sort of didactic sections, which is essentially like a dead calm. This is sort of, you sort of got to go into your dead calm time and just keep going, And it is really funny, like hundreds of pages just on noses, like really funny. It's like, it is funny, like, yeah.
Great. Okay, no, I think that's great. We'll wrap up now so we have time for audience questions, but I might just ask you one just quick final question in closing, because of everything that we've spoken about, you evidently have a lot of incredible life experience, also the artistic career and everything you've achieved to date. And I know that you've been very successfully mentoring younger artists as well for the last 20 years, and recently started charging very reasonable prices on your website for that mentoring process. I wondered, for those of us in the room, or those of us, kind of who might be watching this video at a later date, is there any particular advice? I know that in a mentoring process, this would be very specific to someone's individual circumstances, but, is there any final parting words of wisdom before we open up to the floor?
Yeah, it's top secret, like a tutorial.
Great. So, you'll have to seek Becky out in person to get that.
Too much more to talk about, really. And, I do have like a sort of couple of formulas that I've worked out for what to do, how to start, and how to work out how to do it like really, really well.
Okay.
But we haven't got time for that now.
Great. Okay. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Becky. I really appreciate, and I'm sure everyone here really appreciates, just you kind of sharing your experiences and being so open and generous.
Just a couple of other things that I would just love to just add in at the end. Just, I guess because the video is really useful for people who can't make it or it's not accessible for. Is one, I have lots and lots of energy and bandwidth for connecting and supporting with individuals who might be experiencing late diagnosis, and also, yes, as you said, it's my BB female hormonal health signposting PDF, and it goes from the first period to last. Great signposting stuff there, things people won't tell you, signposted, and then the end is a section on neurodiversity and hormonal life, because they really affect each other a lot. So that's downloadable from my website, and
BeckyBeasley.com.
But also I'm not on social media anymore, but I've gone back old school, so I use my website now as my hub, and so that everything kind of goes there if there's anything happening. So
great.
It's just good, because otherwise I don't want to disappear from the world. But I think lots of people don't go to websites so much now, and that's where I'm doing it old school.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Becky.